They say relationships end in screaming matches, shattered glass, or a tearful confession. Mine ended in dead silence at 11:45 p.m. in the hallway of a $700,000 condo I owned, while my fiancé shushed me so I wouldn't wake up another woman. She wasn't his mistress. Honestly, a mistress would have been easier to deal with. She was Mara, his female best friend, and she was currently sleeping in my bed under an $800 cashmere blanket I had bought for our future, while I stood outside the locked door, doubled over in blinding physical pain. 7 weeks before my wedding, I realized I was the third wheel in my own relationship. I didn't scream, I didn't cry. I just quietly canceled the wedding, sold the condo right out from under him, and walked away. All because of that cashmere blanket. Let me tell you exactly how it shattered. The night before I called my real estate agent, I dragged myself out of the elevator. I had been managing a commercial renovation site in Bellevue since dawn. My stress-induced stomach ulcer was flaring up so aggressively, I literally had to press one hand against the drywall just to stay upright. Every step was agony. All I wanted was my bed. My fingers had barely brushed the cool metal of the master bedroom door handle when a hand clamped down hard over mine. "Don't go in." I blinked, the dim hallway spinning slightly. I looked at Ethan, my fiancé. "What?" My voice was barely a rasp. Mara finally fell asleep. Mara, his best friend since high school. 3 weeks ago, she caught her fiancé cheating. Her life imploded. She took a leave of absence, and Ethan offered her our guest room for a long weekend to recover. A long weekend that somehow bled into a month. I leaned my weight against the doorframe, a cold sweat breaking out on my neck. "Ethan, I need to lie down." He didn't look at me. He glanced back at the heavy oak door, his eyes full of a frantic, protective anxiety, as if the woman sleeping behind it mattered infinitely more than the woman crumbling right in front of him. "Can you just take the couch tonight?" I froze. "What?" "The guest room faces the street. The traffic kept waking her up," he whispered, stepping in front of the door like a bouncer. "The primary bedroom is quieter. She's been sleeping in there for the last couple of nights." The last couple of nights. I had been working midnight shifts all week. I had no idea. As my eyes adjusted to the dark, I saw it. Hanging from my bedroom door handle was a cheap wooden sign. "Please do not disturb." "Did she buy that?" I asked. "Her therapist said rebuilding a strict sleep routine is critical right now, Claire," he deflected, his tone dropping into that patronizing register he reserved for when I was being difficult. "Did her therapist prescribe my bedroom?" "Claire, please. She finally slept 6 straight hours. You can handle one night on the couch. You can handle it." He said it like a compliment. "You can handle it." I had heard variations of it for years. "You're so strong, you're so practical, you always understand." Asterisk. But standing in that hallway, the illusion shattered. I finally heard what those words really meant. Permission. It was permission to sideline me, to use me up, because he knew I was strong enough to survive the neglect. I swallowed the bile rising in my throat. "Fine. Get my stomach medication from the entryway cabinet." He sighed, clearly annoyed at the errand, but jogged down the hall. I watched him open the drawer. He rummaged around for a full minute before holding up my prescription bottle. He squinted at the label. "Claire, this expired 4 months ago." He set it down on the counter, and right next to it, I saw it. A pristine, clear, weekly pill organizer, labeled Mara in bold letters. Every compartment was meticulously sorted. Beside it sat a bright yellow sticky note in Ethan's unmistakable handwriting, detailing her medication times and gentle reminders to drink water. I stared at my expired bottle. 3 years ago, Ethan drove across Seattle at 1 a.m. in pouring rain to find a pharmacy because I was in pain. "We're never running out of this again," he had promised. Apparently, his devotion had an expiration date, too. "We can replace yours tomorrow," he called out, walking back toward me. "Tomorrow?" I snapped, the pain flaring again. "Claire, hers is temporary and the routine matters." "And I don't?" "That's not fair." "No," I whispered, the fight suddenly draining out of me. "It really isn't." He rubbed the back of his neck. "She needs help right now. You've always been stronger than this." The weaponized compliment. Again. I looked at the closed bedroom door, at the stupid wooden sign, at Ethan, standing guard outside of it like a sentry. "Okay," I said quietly. His shoulders instantly dropped. Relief washed over his face. He thought I had capitulated. He thought I was falling back in line. I turned my back to him, walked to the living room sofa, and pulled a scratchy old cotton throw from a basket. My gorgeous, heavy $800 cashmere blanket was in that bedroom, wrapping another woman in warmth. Ethan had laughed at me when I bought it, calling it a ridiculous waste of money. But I bought it anyway, telling him it was the first thing I was buying for our home just because I loved it. Now I was curling into a tight ball on a lumpy sofa in a condo I paid for, shivering under cheap cotton. Before Ethan retreated into his home office for the night, he stopped behind the couch. "If you get up to use the bathroom, just try to be really quiet, okay? She needs this." And I didn't answer. I just kept my eyes squeezed shut until I heard his office door click shut. The absolute second the lock engaged, I opened my eyes. The pain in my stomach was eclipsed by a cold, calculating clarity. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. I opened my banking app. I bought this condo 14 months before he even proposed. The down payment, the mortgage, the deed. Only one name. Mine. For 2 years, I had called it ours. That night, the word died in my throat. At 1:47 in the morning, my thumbs flew across the screen, texting my real estate agent, Jenny. "If I wanted to sell quickly, how fast could we list?" She answered 16 minutes later. "Are you serious?" I looked down the dark hallway at my own bedroom door. I typed one single word, hit send, and locked the screen. "Yes." The next morning, I woke up with a stiff neck, a dull ache in my stomach, and the distinct realization that my living room smelled like warm oatmeal instead of my usual dark roast coffee. I dragged myself off the couch, folded the scratchy cotton throw, and walked into the kitchen. Right beside my high-end espresso machine was a neatly printed yellow sticky note. "Please skip making coffee this morning if you can. The smell is making Mara nauseous." I stared at it. I opened the stainless steel refrigerator. My pitcher of homemade cold brew was gone. So was the Greek yogurt I ate religiously every single morning. In their place stood a literal militia of oat milk cartons, decaf herbal teas, bone broth, and a stack of glass food containers meticulously labeled with masking tape. Mara. Ethan was standing at the stove, gently stirring a pot of oatmeal. He didn't even look up. "Where is my coffee?" I asked, my voice flat. "In the pantry," he said softly, keeping his eyes on the wooden spoon. Mara said the smell of roasted beans made her feel like she couldn't breathe yesterday. So, I can't make coffee in my own kitchen. And he finally looked at me, his eyes heavy with dark circles. Claire, can we please not do this first thing in the morning? I'm exhausted. Before I could answer, Mara appeared in the hallway behind him. She was wrapped in an oversized, cream-colored cardigan, looking fragile and beautifully disheveled. She paused, looking at the empty spot on the counter where my coffee grinder usually sat, then looked at me. "Ethan said you wouldn't mind switching to tea for a few days," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I looked at her. Really looked at her. Did I? She paused. It was just a fraction of a second, but it was long enough. Her eyes darted to Ethan's back, then back to me. I thought he asked you. He hadn't, and Mara knew that now. But here was the kicker. She didn't apologize. She didn't offer to fetch my coffee from the pantry. She didn't say, "Oh my God, of course you should have your coffee. I'll go sit on the balcony." That was the first quiet moment I realized she could clearly see the exact cost of Ethan's endless kindness. She just wasn't the one paying for it. And she chose to stay quiet. I almost opened my mouth to start a war, but then I remembered the text I had sent my realtor at 1:47 a.m. I was done arguing over individual inches of a house I had already decided to leave. So I just looked at Ethan's tense shoulders and said, "Okay." His shoulders immediately loosened. Relief. Once again, he thought I was finally learning how to behave. I walked past them and went into the primary bedroom's walk-in closet to get dressed for work. When I flipped the light switch, I stopped dead in my tracks. My tailored blazers and work dresses had been shoved mercilessly to the far back corner. Mara's puffy coats, chunky cardigans, and endless scarves now occupied the entire front section, the easiest part of the closet to reach. I walked out and opened the door to the guest room. There was no suitcase on the bed. In fact, it barely looked like a bedroom anymore. An expensive-looking wooden easel stood by the window. 2 wooden boxes of oil paints sat open on the rug. A yoga mat leaned neatly against the wall. The guest room had become an art studio. I heard footsteps. Ethan came up behind me in the hallway. "Her therapist wants her to start doing things she used to enjoy," he said defensively. "Grounding exercises." I turned around slowly. "So, the guest room is hers too." "Don't do that, Claire." "Do what?" "Turn everything into territorial warfare." Territorial warfare. I almost admired the sheer audacity of the phrase. He said it as though I was the invading army, rather than the native citizen being systematically pushed out of her own home. "Got it." I nodded slowly, keeping my face a perfect, unreadable mask. I didn't argue. I just got dressed and left for work. The second I got to the office, I didn't check my emails. I booked a windowless conference room, walked inside, and locked the door. Then, I did what I do whenever a multi-million-dollar construction project is failing. I documented everything. I pulled up the original purchase documents. Deed and mortgage, both exclusively in my name. I made a new spreadsheet. Ethan had bought the live-edge dining table, the flat-screen television, and paid for a few minor kitchen upgrades. I pulled up every old bank statement, found the exact receipts, calculated a generous estimated depreciation, and prepared a reimbursement total. At lunch, I called Emily, my college roommate turned ruthless real estate attorney. "Deed and mortgage are entirely mine. Ethan contributed to some furniture." I told her the second she picked up. "What do I need to prepare if I sell it?" There was a long pause on the other end of the line. "You finally woke up," Emily said, her voice dripping with grim satisfaction. "The legal answer is you document his exact financial contributions and reimburse him. The condo itself is clean. It's premarital property. It's yours. And I already made the settlement spreadsheet. She let out a sharp laugh. There she is. But before we hung up, her tone softened. And Claire, just remember, this didn't start with the bedroom. I knew exactly what she meant. A year ago, I had reserved a table for my 30th birthday. Ethan was supposed to meet me there at 7 p.m. At 6:45, Mara called him, hysterical, in the middle of a screaming match with Caleb. Ethan promised he would just talk her down for 5 minutes. I sat at that table, in a silk dress, for 45 minutes. He never showed. I ate my birthday dinner alone. I had called it one bad night. Looking at the blinking cursor on my spreadsheet, I realized with sickening clarity that I had been renaming the exact same problem for a year. Emergency, bad timing, loyalty, compassion. Different names, same result. I waited. Mara came first. At 5:30 p.m., Ethan pulled up outside my office building to pick me up. When I got into the passenger seat, he handed me a steaming travel mug. Ginger tea, he said softly, for your stomach. The gesture almost worked. That was the most insidious part of leaving Ethan. He wasn't a monster every minute of every day. He had just learned that I would accept being second place, as long as he occasionally reminded me what being first place used to feel like. I handled last night badly, he said as he merged onto the highway. I made you feel like you weren't important. Okay, I said, looking out the window. He was quiet for a block. Then, he tried a different tactic. Saturday, he said brightly. Let's finally go get your ring resized. Our wedding was 7 weeks away. My engagement ring had been sitting at the jeweler for 3 months because Ethan had postponed the sizing appointment 4 separate times. Sure, I said. He smiled a little, thinking he had smoothed it over. Then, the car speakers chimed. A Bluetooth call automatically connected. It was Mara. Ethan? Her voice echoed through the car, breathless and frantic. I'm sorry, I know this sounds stupid, but the gray blanket feels damp. Maybe it didn't dry right after I washed it? I tried lying down, and my chest started tightening up again. It smells like mildew. Could you check if the dry cleaner used a different chemical? And without missing a beat, Ethan checked his rearview mirror and aggressively whipped the car into the right lane, taking the next exit. I looked at him. Where are we going? I'm going to swing by the cleaner and check. What about the jeweler? They close at 6. We have time on Saturday. You just said we were going then, Claire. He gave me an exasperated look. The ring isn't going anywhere. I looked out the window. No, he was right. The ring wasn't going anywhere. The wedding wasn't going anywhere. The condo wasn't going anywhere. And I definitely wasn't going anywhere. So everything connected to me could be paused. I pulled my phone out of my purse and opened my email. I stared at the listing agreement Jenny had sent me that morning. While Ethan frantically drove across downtown Seattle to interrogate a dry cleaner about a cashmere blanket to stop another woman's anxiety attack, I digitally signed the paperwork to sell his home right out from under him. 2 days later, we had our final menu meeting at the wedding venue. Or at least, I thought it was our final menu meeting. I had booked it 3 weeks earlier. Ethan arrived 27 minutes late, and he brought Mara with him. Before they even walked through the double doors of the ballroom, Laura, our wedding planner, handed me a revised seating chart. She wouldn't quite meet my eyes. I looked at the glossy paper. We had planned an intimate sweetheart table at the front of the reception, just Ethan and me. Now, a third chair had been added near the groom's family table, practically encroaching on the dance floor. Aisle seat / near side exit / check in with Ethan if needed. I pointed a perfectly manicured finger at the ink. What is this? Laura's expression pinched. I thought Ethan had discussed it with you. He called yesterday. He said Mara might only attend part of the reception, but if she gets overwhelmed, she needs to be somewhere she can step out easily without feeling trapped. That part makes sense, I said, my voice dangerously even. Laura nodded carefully, swallowing hard. There's more. Of course there was. She flipped the page. The espresso dessert I had personally picked? Removed. The reception lighting, dramatically dimmed to reduce sensory overload. The volume cap for the cocktail hour jazz band, reduced to background noise. One of the bridal suite side rooms, redesignated as a quiet room. And then I saw a handwritten note at the very bottom of the first dance timeline. Contingency. If Mara has a panic episode during the reception, Ethan may step away briefly. I read it twice. Our first dance. Laura looked miserable. He said it was just a contingency plan. I almost laughed. I build contingency plans for a living. Fire exits, schedule delays, severe weather. I had never, in my wildest dreams, imagined I would need a contingency plan for my groom abandoning our first dance to go regulate another woman's emotions. The heavy venue doors swung open. Ethan finally walked in. Mar followed him closely, wearing a loose beige sweater. Draped elegantly over her arm was the $800 gray cashmere blanket from my bed. I stared at it. She saw me looking. Claire, I hope this is okay, Mara said, shrinking slightly behind Ethan's shoulder. Ethan said it might help if I saw the space once before the wedding, so I wouldn't panic when it's crowded. I looked dead at Ethan. You changed the seating plan. His expression instantly tightened into defense mode. It's just backup planning. I did it without telling you because you've been so sensitive about Mara lately. For a second, even Laura, the professional neutral party, looked at him in shock. I've been sensitive, I repeated slowly. My wedding seating is a small adjustment? Mara took a step back, clutching the cashmere blanket tighter to her chest. I can leave. Ethan immediately reached out and grabbed her arm. No, you promised me you'd try. I watched her closely. She had offered to leave, but she hadn't taken a single step toward the door. She wasn't going anywhere. We started the tasting. It was an absolute disaster. The first appetizer was seafood. Mara took one single bite, turned pale, and set down her fork. I'm sorry, the smell is making me nauseous. Ethan immediately looked at Laura. Could we switch it to something plainer? Laura looked at me. I didn't blink. I just said, fine. The soup had too many herbs. The overhead chandelier lighting felt too dim. Then, the venue manager started the sample cocktail hour music. 30 seconds later, Mara's shoulders hiked up toward her ears. Oh, she gasped, pressing a hand to her chest. Could it come down a little? Ethan was out of his chair immediately, waving his hands at the sound tech. Can we lower it? Just cut it! The music abruptly dropped to a dull hum. Mara took a deep, shuddering breath. Better. I'm so sorry if I'm a burden, Ethan. I looked around the massive, empty ballroom at the catering staff standing awkwardly near the wall. Then I looked at the man I was supposed to marry. What happens at the wedding, Ethan? I asked. He frowned, sitting back down. What? If the music feels too loud for her on the actual day, do we lower it? We'll deal with it depending on how she feels. And the food. What about it? If something bothers her, we make an adjustment, Claire. It's not a big deal. And if she needs you during our first dance? His face hardened into stone. What exactly are you trying to do right now? I looked at the revised seating chart. I looked at Mara. I looked at the $800 blanket folded in her lap. When exactly do I get to be the person you prioritize at my own wedding? The silence in the ballroom was absolute. I waited. Finally, he sighed, running a hand through his hair. Because you're stronger than she is. There it was, the ultimate excuse. You can handle a few adjustments, Claire, he pleaded, dropping his voice. She can't right now. Mara lowered her eyes and whispered, I don't want to ruin anything. But she still didn't offer to give up her seat. She still held my blanket. Something inside my chest simply finished. It didn't break. The gears just stopped turning. I calmly closed the heavy leather tasting folder in front of me. I pushed my chair back, stood up, and looked directly at Laura. Cancel the wedding. Laura blinked, completely stunned. Claire. Follow the cancellation terms in the contract. Send me the itemized list of non-refundable deposits by tomorrow morning. Ethan stood up so fast his chair scraped violently against the hardwood floor. What? I looked at him, completely devoid of emotion. Cancel the wedding. Mara went stark white. Is this because of me? And I finally looked down at her. No. Then I looked back at Ethan. It's because of him. I walked out of the ballroom. Ethan chased me all the way into the parking lot, catching up to me just as I reached my car. Claire, stop! He yelled, grabbing my elbow. You cannot cancel our wedding over one sentence. I yanked my arm away and turned around. This is not about one sentence, Ethan. It's about a year. He frowned, genuinely bewildered. What does that even mean? It means you missed my 30th birthday because Mara was fighting with Caleb. You rescheduled our engagement photos because she needed you to comfort her. My guest room is her personal art studio, and I am sleeping on a lumpy couch while she sleeps in my bed. She is going through a massive crisis. And now my wedding needs to be structurally redesigned around whether or not she can tolerate jazz music. He rubbed both hands violently over his face. You said you understood. Yes, I did. I nodded slowly. But I ran out. Out of what? Understanding. He just stared at me. You treated my understanding like an endless line of credit, Ethan, I said, my voice dropping to a terrifyingly cold whisper. Every time you spent some, you just assumed there would always be more. My birthday? Claire will understand. Our plans? Claire will understand. My bedroom? Claire will understand. Our wedding? Apparently I'm supposed to understand that, too. You need to calm down. I am extremely calm. And I was. And I think that terrified him much more than if I had been screaming. That night, from a quiet hotel room near my office, I systematically canceled everything. The photographer, the florist, the dress, the venue. I lost thousands of dollars in a single hour. But I manage construction projects for a living. I know that sunk cost is never a valid reason to keep making a bad decision. The next morning, while Ethan was at work, Jenny brought the first buyers through the condo. While they toured the living room, I packed Mara's personal things into 3 clear plastic storage bins. I packed them carefully, placing her medications in a separate Ziploc bag on top so she could find them easily. That evening, Ethan came home from work and stopped dead in his tracks. The 3 storage bins sat perfectly aligned by the front door. "What are those?" he asked, his briefcase dropping to the hardwood floor. "Mara's things," I said from the kitchen island, where I was reviewing my settlement paperwork. His face immediately changed from exhaustion to anger. "Why are they packed?" "Because the buyers came today." He froze. The color rapidly drained from his face. "What buyers?" I looked up at him, my eyes dead. "For the condo, Ethan. I listed it." He literally looked around the living room as if he had accidentally entered the wrong apartment. "What? You listed the condo?" "Yes." "Are you insane?" Ethan yelled, stepping toward the island. "This is our home, Claire." I looked up at him, my eyes completely dead. "The other night, I wasn't allowed to sleep in the bedroom. That is not our home." "That is not the same thing." It became the same thing for me. He paced aggressively across the living room, running his hands through his hair. "You cannot just sell this place right out from under me." "I can, legally and practically." "I paid for things here." "I know." I slid a single sheet of paper across the quartz counter. "Sit down, Ethan." I listed everything. The dining table, the television, the speakers, the kitchen upgrades. I calculated reasonable depreciation. "I will reimburse you directly to your checking account for the furniture and improvements I'm keeping." He walked slowly back to the island and looked down at the meticulously formatted rows of numbers. The anger in his face instantly evaporated, replaced by pure, visceral fear. "You're seriously sitting here, doing a settlement spreadsheet?" "Yes." "We're getting married, Claire." "The wedding is canceled." You were serious?" I stared at him. It was the saddest question he had ever asked me. He had stood in that ballroom. He had heard me cancel the wedding in front of our planner. And some arrogant, deeply ingrained part of his brain still fully believed it was only a performance, a dramatic bluff designed to make him chase me. "Yes," I said softly. "I was serious." Right at that exact second, his phone buzzed loudly on the counter. Mara, R. He glanced at the screen, then silenced it. 10 seconds later, it buzzed again. Then, a text message preview popped up. "Can you come down to the lobby? I don't want to be alone right now." He left it unopened for a few agonizing seconds. He looked at me, his eyes pleading. "Right now," he said, his voice trembling. "We are talking about us." If he had said that 2 weeks earlier, it might have saved us. Now, it only made me unimaginably tired. Then, the phone rang. Mara again. Ethan squeezed his eyes shut, broke, and answered it. "Mara?" Because it was quiet in the kitchen, I could hear her voice bleeding through the receiver. Small, shaky, and frantic. "I'm trying not to freak out," she sobbed. "I went upstairs and saw Claire packed my things. I feel like I'm getting thrown out onto the street." "This is the only place I've been able to sleep. I can't breathe." Ethan rubbed his forehead. "Mara, Nora can come get you," I called her. "She's still at work. Can you just come down to the lobby and sit with me, just for a little while?" I watched Ethan's face. She was not in immediate life-threatening danger. She was simply uncomfortable, and she was asking for him because he had systematically trained her to believe that her discomfort meant he had to come running. He lowered the phone slightly and looked at me, torn. "I'll be back in 20 minutes, Claire." I didn't move. "Nora is coming. Stay here." He stared at me, horrified. "Claire, she's having a panic attack because you kicked her out of her safe space. That's cruel." "No," I countered. "What's cruel is pretending those are the same thing." He shoved his phone in his pocket and grabbed his car keys. "She needs me." I looked at the man I loved for several heavy seconds. Then, I finally delivered the kill shot. "No, Ethan, you need her to need you." His expression morphed instantly into disgust. "That is a sickening thing to say." She has Nora. She has a therapist. She has a fully furnished apartment across town. And yet, every single time she feels a fraction of discomfort, you forcefully position yourself as the only person on earth who can fix it. Because being the person she reaches for first makes you feel important. And he shook his head furiously, backing toward the door. "I'm not going to stand here while you psychoanalyze me to justify being heartless." I pointed at the settlement papers between us. "I need 1 uninterrupted hour, Ethan. 1 hour to talk about the condo, the thousands of dollars in wedding deposits, and whether there is literally anything left between us. No running downstairs. 1 hour." And his phone buzzed in his pocket again. He gripped his keys so hard his knuckles turned white. "This is not the time, Claire. She needs me." "No, she wants you." His jaw tightened. "That's not the same thing." "Exactly." He opened the front door. "I'll come back upstairs when she calms down." "Don't, Ethan," I said to his back. "I'm done waiting for you to come back." The door clicked shut. I sat alone at the kitchen island. For about 5 minutes, the only sound in the condo was the hum of the refrigerator. I did nothing. I just breathed. Then, I opened my laptop, transferred the exact reimbursement amount directly into his checking account, and picked up my phone to call my realtor. "Jenny," I said, "if the Portland couple's all-cash offer is still open, accept it." "And?" "Claire, they're $37,000 under market value," she warned. "I don't care. Accept it." That night, I checked into a hotel. For the first time in a month, I slept in a bed without having to ask if somebody else needed it more. 3 days later, I sat in the downtown office of the title company. I had intentionally not given Ethan the appointment time. Legally, his signature wasn't required. He had 0 equity in the property. The buyers were already sitting across the massive mahogany conference table. The closing agent was walking me through the stack of documents. Initial here. Sign there. Date here. I was exactly halfway through the stack when the heavy glass door of the conference room swung violently open. Ethan stood in the doorway, out of breath, his tie loosened. "Claire." Everyone in the room turned. He stared at the thick stack of paperwork under my pen, then looked at me, his eyes wide with a desperate, sinking panic. You're really selling it right now?" "Yes." I didn't put the pen down. He stepped fully into the room. "Can we please talk outside?" The closing agent adjusted her glasses. "Sir, excuse me, are you also on the title for this property?" Ethan hesitated, his face flushing deep red. "I'm her fiancé." "Not anymore," I said, my voice cutting through the air like ice. The entire conference room went dead quiet. "Only Miss Morgan is listed on the title, sir," the agent said. Ethan's jaw tightened defensively. He looked at me, humiliated and grasping at straws. I put money into that home, Claire. And I reimbursed you in full 3 days ago. Check your account. I'm not talking about money! His voice rose slightly, echoing off the glass walls. We planned our marriage in that kitchen. That was our home. I looked at him, my expression completely hollow. When I needed one bed in that home, Ethan, it stopped being ours. He went completely still. All the fight, all the righteous anger, drained out of him in a single second. I turned my back to him, looked at the closing agent, and signed the final page. That night, alone in my hotel room, my phone screen lit up in the dark. It wasn't Ethan. The caller ID flashed. Karen, his mother. I stared at the glowing screen for 3 full rings. She had never liked me, and I knew exactly why she was calling. The war wasn't over yet. I swiped accept. Claire, Karen began. Her voice was careful, measured, walking on eggshells. Hi, Karen. Ethan called me. He told me about the condo and the wedding. She let out a long, heavy sigh. Honey, don't you think this is all happening very fast for you? You're making massive life decisions in the heat of the moment. I've been living this moment for a year, Karen, I replied evenly. You're just hearing about it today. She was quiet for a second. I know the situation with Mara has been uncomfortable lately. I'm not dismissing your feelings, but Mara has been going through a terrible, terrible time. Her whole life fell apart. There it was, the exact same script Ethan had been reading from. And you? Karen pressed on, taking my silence as an invitation. Well, you've always been the more practical one, the strong one. I closed my eyes, leaning my head against the cold glass of the hotel window. Strong, practical, capable, understanding. T who is like, oh no. Different words. Exact same job description. Absorb the impact so everyone else can stay comfortable. Karen, I said, my voice dropping an octave. Your son made me sleep on a lumpy couch in a condo that I bought with my own money because his friend was sleeping in my bed. Silence on the other end. I'm not saying that was ideal, she finally stammered. He rewrote our entire wedding schedule so he could abandon our first dance if she got slightly anxious. He knew exactly what medication she needed, at exactly what hour, to help her sleep. Meanwhile, my emergency stomach medication in the hallway cabinet was 4 months expired. Karen said absolutely nothing. I could hear her breathing on the line. Then she let out a sad, resigned sigh. Ethan just has a very soft heart, Claire. That single sentence did it. It sparked a deep, cold, righteous fury that settled permanently into my bones. Then Ethan should pay for the cost of his soft heart, I said. What? For the past year, Karen, I have been the one paying for it. He wants to be a loyal friend, so I lose my birthday dinner. He wants Mara to feel safe, so I lose my bedroom. He wants to be the person she trusts most, so I lose my fiancé every time her phone rings. He wants her comfortable at our reception, so I lose my wedding. And I paused, letting the reality of the list hang heavy in the air. Those weren't his sacrifices, Karen. They were mine. He gave away pieces of me to keep her whole. I'm done footing the bill. I hung up the phone and turned off the lights. I had 7 days before possession of the condo officially transferred. I rented a modest 2-bedroom apartment 20 minutes from my office. When I went to a local store to buy a new mattress, the salesman looked at his clipboard. "Queen or king?" he asked. "King," I replied. He glanced around. "Just you?" "Yes." He smiled politely. "You're going to have a lot of room." That's exactly the point. On my 3rd day of packing up the condo, Ethan came by. He looked terrible. He had the hollow, defeated look of a man who had finally hit the bottom of a very long fall. I was in the kitchen, taping up a cardboard box of plates. I didn't stop working. "Mara moved in with Nora," he said, leaning heavily against the doorframe. "Good." I tore a strip of packing tape. The sound violently ripped through the quiet room. "Nora laid into me last night." His voice cracked. "She said I kept turning every uncomfortable moment into a reason Mara didn't have to stand on her own 2 feet. She said, I liked being the person Mara called first." "I told you that already, Ethan." "I know." He rubbed his face. "But there's something else. Something you need to know." I didn't look up. "I really don't think I do." "The first night Mara slept in our room," he swallowed hard, "she asked me if you would mind, and—" My hands stopped moving. The roll of tape slipped from my fingers and hit the granite counter with a dull thud. I looked at him. "What did you say?" His voice dropped to a shameful whisper. "I told her you wouldn't." The betrayal wrapped around my throat. "So, you knew it required my permission?" she asked, because even Mara understood that the bedroom was mine. "And you gave her my answer for me." "I'm so sorry, Claire." That officially erased the very last pathetic excuse I had been giving him. He hadn't just been blind to my discomfort. He consciously decided he already knew what I was allowed to sacrifice. "That's our whole relationship," I whispered. "You kept volunteering me for things you wanted to give." He took a step toward me, his eyes pleading. "I can change, Claire. I swear to God." "I actually believe you might change," I said softly. His face lit up with desperate hope. "But I don't have to stay and supervise whether you do." The light died in his eyes instantly. "You knew these things hurt me, Ethan. You just didn't think hurting me would ever cost you anything." For the first time in our history, Ethan did not argue. He just turned around and walked out. Later that same afternoon, there was a quiet knock on the door. It was Mara. She looked entirely different without the gray cashmere blanket draped around her shoulders. Smaller, stripped of the massive protective frame Ethan had built around her. "I came for the rest of my things," she said, looking at the clear plastic boxes by the door. But she didn't bend down to pick them up. She just stood there. "I owe you an apology. I really was having panic attacks, Claire. I swear I wasn't pretending." "I know," I said evenly. "That was never the part I doubted, Mara." She swallowed hard, tears pooling in her eyes. "At first, I thought it was temporary. But then, it got easy." "Easy how?" "If something made me anxious, I just said it out loud and Ethan fixed it. I hadn't felt in control of a single thing in my life since Caleb cheated on me. But suddenly, if I said I couldn't sleep, I magically got the quietest room in the house. If I said the smell of roasted coffee made me nauseous, the coffee completely disappeared. And if jazz music made you anxious, my wedding changed. I finished for her. Yes. You knew I wasn't okay with it. She picked at a loose thread on her sweater. Not at first. Then she looked directly into my eyes. But later, yes, I knew. There it was. Not a calculated villain monologue, just a selfish, insidious truth. Why? I asked. Mara's tears finally spilled over. Because after being the person Caleb chose last for months, it felt really good to be the person someone chose first. And I almost laughed at the sick, twisted symmetry. She healed her wound of being placed second by actively letting Ethan place me second instead. And the wedding tasting? I pressed. You saw my face when I looked at that revised seating chart. You knew I didn't agree to it. Why did you stay at the table? And she looked absolutely gutted, deeply, profoundly ashamed. Because I wanted to see if he would still choose what I needed, once you were standing right there. And he did, I said quietly. Yes, he did. I let that brutal truth sit between us. I didn't yell. I didn't slap her. I just realized I didn't hate her anymore. I just pitied her. Take your things, Mara, I said softly. She carried the bins out to the hallway. I closed the door on her, finally alone in my empty condo. The next morning was the final walkthrough with the buyers. Before they arrived, I walked through the empty rooms one last time. The wooden easel was gone. The oat milk was gone. The Do Not Disturb sign was gone. I pushed open the door to the primary bedroom. It was completely stripped bare, except for one single thing. Sitting in the exact center of the empty hardwood floor, perfectly folded, was the $800 gray cashmere blanket. And standing right next to it was Ethan. Ethan stood in the center of the empty primary bedroom, staring down at the $800 gray cashmere blanket perfectly folded on the bare hardwood floor. He looked up as I walked in. He looked exhausted, stripped of all the arrogant certainty he had carried for the last year. "You're not taking this?" he asked, his voice echoing in the hollow room. "No. But you loved this blanket, Claire." "I did." He stepped over to it, running a hand over the expensive fabric. He looked at me, a desperate, confused sadness in his eyes. "I could buy you another one. I swear to God, Claire. I'll buy you 10 of them. We can start completely over." I couldn't help it. I laughed softly. The sound was sharp, bouncing off the empty walls. He looked hurt, completely bewildered. "What?" "You still don't understand, Ethan," I said, leaning against the doorframe. "It was never just a blanket, and I don't need another one." Before he could answer, the front door of the condo clicked open. Jenny's voice rang out down the hallway, followed by the chatter of the buyers. The Portland couple walked into the bedroom. The wife stopped abruptly, her eyes darting between Ethan, me, and the blanket on the floor. "Oh, I'm sorry," she said, looking slightly uncomfortable. "Are we interrupting?" "Not at all," I said brightly, stepping fully into the room. "We were just finishing up." The wife's eyes drifted down to the floor. She gasped softly. "Oh my God, this cashmere is gorgeous." She looked at me. "You're absolutely sure this isn't going with you? Did you forget to pack it?" "I didn't forget it," I said, holding my clipboard tight. "Would you be willing to sell it?" she asked eagerly. I looked at the blanket. I thought about the night I had curled up on the lumpy couch, freezing under cheap cotton, while the woman trying to systematically replace me slept warmly underneath it. I looked at Ethan, whose face was pale. "You can have it," I said. The wife's face lit up like a child on Christmas morning. "Seriously?" "Yes. But this is incredibly expensive." "I know," I said, locking eyes with Ethan. "It cost me a hell of a lot more than you think. But I'm leaving it behind. Call it a housewarming gift." Ethan physically flinched. He finally understood. I wasn't just giving away a piece of fabric. I was handing a stranger the exact symbol of his betrayal, rendering it completely meaningless. 10 minutes later, the paperwork was signed. Jenny and I stood outside on the sidewalk. She waited until the heavy glass door of the building clicked shut, locking Ethan inside his past. Jenny turned to me, dropping her professional broker persona completely. "Are you really okay, Claire?" I looked at the final wire transfer confirmation on my phone screen. The condo had sold for $37,000 under market value. Between the rush sale, the non-refundable wedding deposits, the venue cancellation fees, and the broken contracts, leaving Ethan had cost me a painfully large amount of cash. "Okay isn't exactly the word," I admitted, sliding my phone into my pocket. "It was expensive." Jenny laughed, wrapping her coat tighter against the biting Seattle wind. "So, you regret it?" "No." I looked back up at the building. "It hurts. But that's not the same thing as regret." "Exactly," she smiled. "Let's get a drink." I moved into my new, ordinary apartment 2 days later. The very first thing I bought was coffee. A dark French roast, the kind that aggressively filled the entire kitchen with a rich, heavy scent the second I tore open the bag. I stocked the fridge with Greek yogurt. I put hot sauce on the top shelf. I placed a brand new, unexpired bottle of stomach medication right at the front of the bathroom cabinet. I bought a small Bluetooth speaker, set it on the kitchen counter, and played jazz music on a Saturday morning. Nobody asked me to turn it down. Nobody reminded me to walk quietly down my own hallway. Nobody told me that someone else needed my room more than I did. A month passed. The dust settled. I bought a cheap $99 cream-colored knitted throw and casually tossed it across the foot of my new king-size bed. Then came a Saturday night. Outside, the rain started tapping aggressively against the bedroom window. Real Seattle rain. No artificial white noise machine. No rigid sleep schedules. My phone lit up on the nightstand in the dark. "Ethan, time." I stared at the glowing screen. I almost ignored it. But then the text preview caught my eye. Today was supposed to be our wedding. I looked at the calendar on my screen. He was right. I had been so busy managing new construction projects at work that I had completely forgotten the date. A second message came through. "I drove past the venue tonight. It was empty." Then, a third. "I finally understand what you meant when you asked, 'What about me?'" I sat there in the quiet of my apartment for a long time, just watching the cursor blink on the lock screen. Then, one final message appeared. "I'm so sorry, Claire, for everything." There had been a time, a long, desperate time, when I would have given almost anything to hear him say those words and truly mean them. I had waited for him to notice me, waited for him to understand, waited for him to finally look at a situation and ask what I needed before he mathematically calculated what I could survive. Now, the grand apology had finally arrived, and it arrived entirely too late. I didn't reply. I just swiped left, deleted the entire thread, and blocked his number. For a year of my life, every single one of my needs had come attached with the exact same invisible label. Later. My birthday could be made up later. My medicine could be replaced tomorrow. My bed would be mine again later. The wedding could be adjusted because Claire would understand. Claire is strong. Claire is practical. Claire can handle it. I had mistakenly taken those words as a sign of love and respect. I didn't realize they had slowly become a convenient excuse to erase me quietly. I didn't leave Ethan just because he wanted to help a friend through a broken engagement. I left because every time helping her required a sacrifice, he immediately volunteered mine. A relationship that belongs to you should never require you to beg for a seat at your own table. A home that belongs to you should never require you to knock. So, I sold it. I canceled the wedding. I gave Ethan back what was rightfully his, and I stopped treating my ability to endure pain as a reason anyone was entitled to cause it. These days, when my stomach hurts from stress, the medicine in my cabinet is fully stocked. I make my coffee as dark and as strong as I want. Sometimes I sleep diagonally across the entire expanse of my king-size bed. No one asks me to move. I am strong. I am practical. I can handle being hurt. That was never the problem. The problem was believing that just because I could handle it meant that I was supposed to. I am not, and I never will again.